Hey there, Mark Brown. Okay, we're on part 5. Now, I'm going to apologize right up front. If you're following along, we have steps and we have parts, and they are not in line. So I take responsibility. That's part of when you just are doing this without planning each thing perfectly. So I accept responsibility, but it's a mess. But we're out there doing it. We're getting it out there. I've seen a lot of people in the speaking world, the presentation world, the training world that have these ideas, and there are a lot of poor procrastinators out there. So I'm glad we just dive in. We do it, Mark, and then we just apologize for our mistakes along the way, but we own it, and I own it. So part 5, make it unforgettable. This is, once we've got the opening, the closing established, go and listen to those episodes if you haven't already. We've got our premise clear. We've mined your life in part 1. This is where we start to pull it together. But Mark, I want to talk briefly about structure before we go into story. So if you're following along and you heard us talking about the Fripp speech model, part of its brilliance is its simplicity. But wait a minute. Mark, what are your initial thoughts?
Let's find out in a second.
Anyone can give a presentation. Few deliver unforgettable presentations. What's the difference? You're about to find out. Welcome to the Unforgettable Presentations Podcasts with your hosts, world champion speakers and coaches Mark Brown.
Your life tells a story, and there's someone out there who needs to hear it.
And Darren LaCroix.
Stage time, stage time, stage time.
Ready for some powerful presentation ahas? Let's dive right in.
Did you just wax eloquent, Darren LaCroix? I wrote this down. The power of the Fripp structure is in its simplicity.
Boom.
I mean, Darren just dropped a bomb there. And here's a principle for us to understand. The more powerful the simpler the structure, the more effective it becomes. What we're showing you, or what we're showing you through our book, Deliver Unforgettable Presentations, is a structure that allows you to create a presentation up to an hour-long keynote on a single sheet of paper using a proven structure. And we're going through this series of 7 steps to help you to see, so get a glimpse, a taste of what the book offers in greater detail. But don't forget this. The structure is so powerful. You can create a keynote on one sheet of paper. Darren, we have shown our attendees at our workshops and webinars and seminars time and time again. The copies I have in my folder are full keynotes that are on one single sheet of paper. It all comes down to one thing: powerful structure.
Yeah, and if you can't do it first, if you can't build it first on a single sheet of paper, you're not clear. And as Patricia Fripp, our coach, our mentor, our co-author, she says, the more complex your topic, the more it needs to be built on a simple structure. The more complex your topic, if you're talking about rocket science, even if it's the rocket scientist, you need a simple structure to build it on. So this is where we go into tap back into part 1, where you mind your life and you've got these stories. Well, now we need to understand that there's people in front of us, sitting in front of us, whether online or in person, who are at different levels of knowledge, of expertise on your topic. So we need to handle the person who's newer, who needs hope, who needs inspiration, who needs direction. And then you got the veteran who knows it all, who maybe needs to go back to some of those basic foundations, or maybe they need the new insight from you that they aren't aware of. And so one of the magic principle of making it unforgettable is getting it down to 3 main points, but not only 3 main points, but now we have to make each point digestible by each of the audience. So the person who's new, the person who's been around for a while, we need to make sure. And some people come with their just personality that they need the sources. Where's your source? Cite your source. And you have the other people like, I don't care. Tell me a story. So we need to take care of all of them. And so we got to prove our points of wisdom. So in the Fripp speech model, we have 3 points of wisdom. By the way, that's all you have time for to make it unforgettable. Like you could do 12 points. I saw one, it was a famous actor celebrity who did a keynote commencement speech, and it was like 13 points. Well, maybe his philosophy was they'll take something away, but and there were some great moments in the speech, but it could have been so much better, more powerful, more impactful. But what we also need to do is take each point of wisdom, which we call a chunk, and which is about 10 to 15 minutes based on how long you have. But just think of a 10-minute slot. And we have our point, and now, again, 3 points, we have to literally fill in the blanks. We need the evidence to prove the point. We can't just tell you never turn down stage time. One of my points of it. I can't just tell you that. You're like, well, why? What does it matter? So now we have 3 pieces of evidence pointing back to reinforce that one point. So we're coming at it from 3 different angles to be able to help this audience who needs the varying perspective, who needs the source, who needs the story. So we want to come at it from 3 different perspectives to reinforce that one point of wisdom.
And by the way, Darren just mentioned that in your audience, you have individuals with different levels of expertise, different personalities, and different learning styles. If you attend any of our workshops about presentations, you'll notice that Darren and I make a point of making our attendees aware of the different kinds of individuals who are in their audience. As a matter of fact, on our podcast a couple of years ago, we did a series on serving the different kinds of people in your audience. If Darren can pull up that number, those 3 or 4 episodes, we'll tell you what those episodes are. But they point out to us, and please hear this carefully, because people learn in different ways, the 3 bits of evidence Darren talks about can be different. Who's in your audience? Episode 70, 71, and 72 of this podcast. Go back and check them out. If you can watch them on the video, it's really very helpful. And Darren says 3 different points, the 3 different bits of evidence, because people learn and absorb in different ways. For some people, that evidence could be a poll. Give me a poll from Barna Research. Give me a research finding. Give me some statistics and quote that source. What did USA Today say? What did Forbes say? Other people want an illustration. You show me something physically, I see it, I got it. Others just tell me a story. And some people, I'm in the room, I'm good. But knowing that individuals, and Darren also said, there are people who say, you know what? I want chapter and verse. I want to know where it's quoted from. An 1873 report in. Fine. But if you use different styles of evidence, different bits of evidence, different modes of evidence, then that will give you a better chance of reaching a broader audience. But here's the cool part. It also gives you, as the expert, that much more, quote unquote, tools in your tool belt to be able to share your expertise, and you're not limited to a particular industry. You can take your principles and share them effectively in the medical, in industry, in education, maybe even to youth and young adults. By having various types of evidence, you show your professionalism and your ability to reach a broader, more global audience. And guess what? We're recording now in 2025. The world in the last 5 years has become a very small place, and we can reach all corners of the globe instantly through modern technology. So we need to be equipped to serve our potential audiences globally, and that's Also a reason why, in her great wisdom and vision, Patricia Frey put this together years ago, not foreseeing how powerful it would be for you as you begin to build your unforgettable presentation.
Yeah. And the reason we need that varying evidence, I love that you say that, Mark. So you might use a story, a poll, a article, a statistic, whatever that is, vary it. And what we're trying to do, listen up, is convince the jury in the mind of the audience. We're trying to convince the jury in the mind of the audience. They bring their lifelong skepticism, their perspective, their insecurities with them. So our goal is to help as many as we can. You're never going to convince all of them. But our goal is to be unforgettable so we can reinforce the ones who are going to love us anyway. But those people who are on the fence, that if we could be more compelling, more convincing, and more helpful. So quick example, these are stories, but in one of my points of wisdom, which is never turn down stage time, I tell a story of my comedy mentor who taught me this principle. He enlightened me with it, which I was unaware of, but then how I found Toastmasters and how that helped me see what he was saying, and then built on that, how outsiders, my high school buddies who weren't comedians, how their perspective of their unknowing compared to this knowing, all three of these ideas and insights come back to reinforcing stage time. Never turn down stage time. I'm not just saying it and then they're going to believe it. For sure, that ain't going to ever happen. But, oh, Mark, your thoughts?
That principle applies. I said earlier to different kinds of audiences. I have spent 25 years in schools in North America, even in Asia. I was in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. And I talk to young people ages 12 through 18. And I talk about relationships, how we treat each other, how our harsh words can cause children to make very poor choices that eventually can hurt others and themselves. It's a heavy topic at times. I'm talking to 15 and 16-year-old kids. I'm talking about teen suicide. And I can give them information, but to reinforce even the issue of cyberbullying, to reinforce that, I put up a slide with research that shows percentages, how many kids have made that choice. I then get a news report about the number of kids who have done it, their ages at the time, and I tell stories of people, young people who have talked to me, whom I've met personally. So I've got stories, I've got statistics, I've got research findings, 3 different kinds of information for these teens to reinforce the point. We don't really appreciate the power of our words when we say them and we say we're just kidding. These are teenagers. If it can work for teens, it'll work for you, all your audiences. And again, I want to reinforce this across different industries. So we're going to invite you to be very creative and think about this. Sometimes the linchpin could be a quote you heard or read somewhere. Perhaps it's a poem that somebody wrote. It could have been an article you read. There are various ways to change up the supporting evidence you give to keep your audience engaged, to reinforce your point, and thus be on your way to make your presentation unforgettable.
Yeah, remember, our goal that we learned from Michael Haig is to elicit emotion. If you want to be unforgettable, you must elicit emotion. And one of the big keys for that is the stories. In the stories. So we talked about structure, using different parts of evidence, but now switching over to the unforgettable story model. We call it our then to now story model. And anybody can tell a story, but a lot of them are boring. And some of them are good. Just because it happened doesn't mean you structured it right. We need to understand what's really important for the listener. We're too close to our own stories. Even when I get coached, I know all of this. I teach all of this, but I'm so close to my own story. I often, whenever I do a new one, I reach out to Mark Brown, to Michael Davis, to some of the legends in NSA to get some of their perspective on my story because I'm so close. And the model, which is in the book, we call it, where was the character at the beginning of the story? What did they look like? What was their emotion? And then what was the challenge? What happened? And then it gets worse. Dun, 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 dun. And this could be an external factor and an internal factor. Maybe their insecurities bubbled up from their youth. And then all of a sudden their kid just got accepted to a really expensive college. So that's an outside factor, insecurity, the inside factor. So just giving you the, as Michael Haig says, the inner journey and the outer journey, they could both be outer, they could both be inner, but just giving you some options. And this is what I call the struggle, the true struggle of going through this. Now, here's the problem. When we struggle, we feel everything and we think everything is hard. Well, it might be. However, as the audience listening to your story to make this specific point, we don't need all of it. In fact, we don't need most of it. Mark, your thoughts on that much?
I always say, when you are selective, you are effective. So there are parts of our story that may sound good or appeal to us, but I always ask, if I remove that character, if I remove that interaction, if I remove that scene, will it harm the story? If the answer comes back to me, no, it doesn't really make a difference, then I don't need it. And then I ask one more question. For this to be effective, what does my audience need to know? I'll repeat that. What does my audience need to know? If you look at Hollywood, very often with the cold opening in a movie, the movie starts, is a car chase going on, somebody's leaning outside, he's firing a gun, they're in the alleyway, a guy trips over a garbage can, and the car pulls up, and you're like, whoa, what just happened? It could have taken you to a scene where the person's out of his front of his house, and somebody says, hey, I'm coming to get you. Okay, I need to get going. Light a cigarette, throw it down, put my jacket on, turn the corner, go down the alley. The guy gets a phone call. Hey, we just saw Mark. He's on Elm Street down by the alley. Go get him. They could do all of that. We could say, hey, honey, I got to come by. I'll see you later. Wave to a kid on the street on a bicycle. It's superfluous. We don't need it. That was dramatic. But think about your own stories, particularly as Darren says, where the character was, where the challenge came. We need to get to the challenge quickly. Darren, you told me that you learned in screenwriting as a principle about the scene, enter the scene late and leave early. So we got to decide, what does the audience need to see and know to really make the story tight, compact, engaging, and keep the audience listening?
Yeah, and then we get, in the story model, then we get to the aha, the revelation. The guru delivers the lesson. Now, the guru could be a person. It could be a child. It could be a mentor. It could be a puppy dog. But
it could be a tree.
The lesson is delivered, which changes the perspective of the hero, the main character. And now, boom, they're never the same. So now what do they look like? Now what is their emotion? And we should have diametrically opposing emotion and what they look like now. They stand in confidence. They were insecure. So we need that opposition of them at the beginning of the story and then at the end of the story. Look, Hollywood does this all the time. We need to do it differently because we're delivering the story from stage and don't have 120 minutes. So we have to be a little more concise. But again, what helps deliver the message?
Yeah, and the thing is, when we can be very clear that the audience can see the change in the character. I think it was Michael Haig, who is a story consultant and who was once doing it for Hollywood, I know. His company is called Story Mastery, and we are blessed to consider him a friend and partner. He has served with us at Stage Time for years. And Michael says if a character doesn't change, there is no story. Which is why the then and the now, Darren says, you have to see a clear difference in the character changing. Sometimes in your story, more than one character changes. But that change has to be evident for us to see that, to be the proof that the validity and the value of your story.
And so to recap a bit, we need to structure it in a way that is absorbable, that we make 3 points Look, you could argue if you have four. If you have a 4-letter acronym, like you can do that. We don't recommend it, but hey, we're not here to change that. But don't have 5, 6, 7, or 8. Like you don't have time. I've seen long words as acronyms for the whole speech, and we'll just leave that aside. We talked about it in past episodes.
Yeah.
However, for you, go for 3. You know, if you have that 4th point that must be in there, well, maybe that's the close instead of one of the 3 points, or maybe that's the opening with a bang. And you're well, we're going to get to it in part 6, the final part of the 7 steps. Again, forgive the numbers and steps not being congruous.
Ooh, nice.
Just on fire today, Mark.
I'm telling you, you're doing it, man.
So we've got the structure of the whole presentation, so it's absorbable, and then the structure of the story, which makes it elicit emotion. So not only does the story stick, but if the story sticks, as your buddy and mentor David Brooks says, if they remember the story, they'll remember the point. If they remember the point, they'll remember the story, which is why we also have talked about in the past your foundational phrase. What's that sticky phrase you want them remembering after your speech? Whether it's a 7-minute speech or a 1-hour speech, getting that message to stick takes a little time. But once you do, it's going to multiply your effort. Mark Brown, final thoughts?
Real quickly, when you have a foundational phrase, it's one more tool to help the audience remember the power of your stories and power of structure. We invite you, go back to the book, get the book, go through this in detail, and find how this particular part 5, that step of making it unforgettable, help you put together a cohesive presentation. I think, Darren, then you're really on your way one more time to delivering an unforgettable presentation.
See you next week.
Hey there, this is Darren LaCroix. Thanks for checking out this podcast episode on YouTube. If you want all of them, not every one is on YouTube, check out your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode. Keep being a sponge so you can be unforgettable.
Check out StagetimeUniversity.com, where good presenters become unforgettable.